I bet you're wondering what all these things are that are on the table. Well, we're going to tell you exactly what they are. This is Crime Watch. Hello and welcome to Crime Watch. I'm Jane Cameron with Sergeant Chris Nunez of the Buena Park Police Department. You know, we have an interesting array of, I'll call them items here on the table. And it's all about use of force. It's in the news talking about officers when they shoot somebody, if they should have shot them, what they should have used, what happened, why they did it. It goes on and on and on and on. I'm sure it's a challenge as a police officer just when you have all these different situations, how you think you need to handle them.
It is a challenge, and police departments, not just the Buena Park Police Department, but all police departments have an array of tools or weapons to deal with, with certain circumstances. So along with that, you can imagine takes a fair amount of training and support in terms of budget, to support the equipment, the munitions that we utilize, from these different types of weapons and so on. So I mean the picture is huge, really, when you think about it. But all of this must be done when in that instant in the field where an officer is faced with a circumstance where they have to use force.
Well, it's interesting. You talk about that officer in the field. If that officer would have put all of these items on their tool belt, they would not be able to move very quickly. These are some very, very bulky tools. But an officer in the field, he has minimal things, the gun, the baton. What else?
Well, an officer in the field, well, certainly all of these individual pieces of equipment are available in the field. Now, when I say that, I'm talking about usually in the police car. So an officer carries on their person a lot of equipment, and when you think about it, they always have their firearm. And then we have policy that requires officers that work in the field and on a patrol level to carry a taser. We have one of those on the table, a baton, pepper spray, those sorts of things. So when you start adding all that up, so along with the firearm that requires ammunition, along with the taser that requires a second holster. How you carry that equipment, so when you see police officers today, they're carrying much more gear than officers even 10 or 15 years ago. So that requires a level of expertise and practice and training for each item of equipment that they deploy in the field, that they carry on their person. So having said that, officers don't pull a little red wagon around with them when they get out of the car. We don't wear backpacks to carry all this stuff. So if you are involved in an instantaneous encounter, and you may not have an opportunity to get back to your police car to get one of these other tools, one of these other force options that would provide you, a greater array of options. So if there's a protracted event where additional officers are coming, then you have a better chance of another officer bringing a less lethal shotgun, and we'll talk about what that is, or some of these other items. But that takes coordination, supervision, and all while the initial officers are having to deal with whatever the problem is.
How does an officer know what tool to use that is on their belt? You said the gun, the baton, the pepper spray, the taser. How does the officer know with an encounter with a person whether to grab the gun or the taser spray or pepper them or what?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's and a fair question, and I think the best way for me to respond to that is, you know, common sense really has a lot to do with this. If I'm encountering someone that is armed with a weapon, and we can talk a little bit more about that as we go. So anything can be a weapon, but for sake of our discussion, if I'm encountering someone with a firearm, it would really do me no good to use pepper spray or a taser or my baton. So that's what I mean about common sense. If I'm encountering someone that is just boisterous, uncooperative, agitated, displaying signs of aggression, maybe initially pepper spray or my baton or even my taser at the ready would be a good force option initially. So and that's the deal with this subject is it can change dramatically in a matter of a second. So
Well, take a step back. When an officer approaches someone, what are the rights of that person when that officer, like if you were to come and want to speak to me, what rights do I have? Do I have to talk to you? Can I walk away? That fits into all of this.
it really does. And so when the public sees that video clip from somebody's cell phone, it doesn't take any of that into account. So we all in the public are making judgment on just a small percentage of the totality of circumstances. So what you're asking again is a fair question. Sometimes the police have a right to just outright detain someone, and that individual doesn't have the legal right to ignore the officer and just walk away. Now that takes some legal circumstances, legal issues to be in place first that the citizen or the person being contacted by the officer may not know about. And sometimes it's, depending on exactly what we're talking about, it may not be privy for the officer to share that right up front. Sometimes the citizen has the absolute right to walk away. And
How does a citizen know at that point whether they have a right?
yeah, they may not.
But if they try to walk away, I'm sure the officer will say, "No, wait a minute, come back here."
See, if the officer has a legal justification to outright detain someone, common sense would tell me, I'm not going to start out with pouncing on someone and putting them in handcuffs and setting them on the curb, especially if even though I have the right to detain someone and they're not free to leave, I may not start at that level. A lot of times we the police can accomplish our work just by talking to people, but often it doesn't take very long to realize that just by simply talking to someone, you're not always going to gain compliance from that individual. So you have to try something else. You have to control the contact so that the citizen and the officer and anyone else in the public, stays safe.
You talk about all these different things, and it becomes very apparent, and hopefully to all of you too, that that's why you go to a police academy, because the common person doesn't know all the different procedures and guidance and rules and policies and whatever else, and the legal side of it as well, just by reading a newspaper or watching a video or seeing something on television. There's all of this background as to why the officer does what they do and can do what they do.
Right. So, I like personally, I like to start with just interacting with someone, in hopes I'm going to get willful compliance. And and take it from there. Now, if I know I'm contacting a violent person or a murder suspect, well, that's different. That changes the game right from the onset. So it really depends. The circumstances involving police contact and then the eventual application of some type of force by the police is predicated on so many factors that we can't even cover here. It would literally take weeks and weeks to actually study. And you mentioned the police academy. Much of it is dedicated to this kind of dialogue, this kind of instruction. So,
Well, these are the items that come into play when that person doesn't want to stay around and talk to you, or doesn't want to drop the aggression, or doesn't want to do something, put down the knife that they're threatening with, or whatever. So, do you want to start at this end and explain some of the
Sure.
items? Because this is the taser, isn't it?
Yes, that's a taser. I already mentioned that our officers, particularly patrol officers that work in the field, carry this taser. And we've used them for many, many years. They're very popular and common tool in law enforcement. They all work in the same fashion. The science behind how tasers work are all the same, and this piece of equipment is, just in terms of technology, is becoming more and more and more advanced. So there's actually a light, there's recording equipment built into the device that tells you how many applications of the current that's been applied, how the duration, it's time and date stamped. So what that does is it really, not to interrupt you, but what it does is it really takes away that ability for either side, whether it's the officer or or the citizen, to make claims that that we used it in an improper way, or applied applications over and over and over when it just wasn't the truth. So you can tell that it's similar to like a black box in an airplane, where it tracks all the vital information about the performance, and so you can tell that, and we actually download that information and keep track of that. So it's important in a contact, if an officer says that they used the taser and applied 2 applications, and the arrestee is saying that they tased me 6 times. Well, clearly we can tell that. So
It's like a little mini computer.
sort of, yeah. It just records that information, and then we do connect it to a computer, and the information's transferred, and now it's on record.
Now, I believe one of the key elements of the taser to work is that it has to make some type of a connection.
Right.
And it's not just any type of connection.
Yeah. So these are cartridges that actually insert into the taser. So these cartridges are inside these blast doors, have copper wire that's wound in a certain way, and then on the ends of the wire are tiny little barbs. So when you actually deploy the taser or pull the trigger, fire the darts out, these blast doors blast open, and the darts come out connected to the wire, and you have to make a good connection. So sometimes deploying the taser is not effective. It doesn't work. If someone has bulky clothing, or they're moving around at the time the taser is deployed, so you have to get 2 darts to actually make decent connection to the person in order for the taser to be effective.
Can it attach to clothing? You mentioned bulky clothing.
Yeah.
Does it have to get close to the skin or beyond the
It
skin?
has to get close to the skin. For the most effective use are for the darts to actually penetrate the skin. Now they can work. It's less effective because there may be intermittent contact and that sort of thing. If it's attached to the clothing, So that's, that's not ideal. And with someone moving around or rolling around, they can cause the darts to come loose, and now it's useless.
Is it one shock, or can the officer keep the shock going through the
Good
wires?
question. So when you initially deploy the taser, they're automatically programmed to deliver 5 seconds of application, 5 seconds of current, unless the officer turns it off sooner. But if you just deploy it, it'll deliver 5 seconds and then stop, all by itself. And the officer can reapply another five if it's needed.
And
Or
that's all tracked, right?
it's all tracked, right? It's all recorded. So the officer has control. So let's just say we deploy the taser, and on that initial deployment, you get good contact with the barbs. You will be able to tell if it's effective, because it just causes involuntary paralysis. So you can't control, you can't stand, you can't walk, you can't fight. It like locks your muscles up. And
I
it
laugh
hurts.
because several years ago we went out and one of the officers willingly was tased, and it was freaky.
Yeah. It's, part of our training, we do get officers to volunteer, and we actually deploy the taser on them. And it's interesting, the effects. And these officers, so here's another point I want to make. Once that 5 seconds is over, the person that's being tased can literally rebound right back to where they were in terms of being able to physically resist, just right before they were actually tased. So it gives the officers about a window of 5 seconds to control that person. So someone else would have to come in and apply handcuffs, or come in and gain control of that individual. Now you can always apply a second 5-round application, or turn it off. So I mean, the officer has control. Another limitation of the taser is I mentioned the wires that are inside of the cartridges. They're only going to protrude 25 feet. So in a situation that's very fluid, where people are moving around, or someone is running at you or running away from you, or laterally, the officer has to be skilled enough to judge if you're inside of 25 feet. Otherwise, the barbs are going to be useless, and it's one application. So some officers will carry additional cartridges, so you can reload a new cartridge, and then try again. But so you can see, if you're thinking about it, if you're the one trying to use a taser on someone who's aggressive and combative, there are a lot of limitations. So it's a very effective, very useful tool, but there are limitations in many cases where it wasn't effective for any variety of reasons.
So let me guess, this is less lethal.
Yeah, it's called less lethal because there's always a potential that someone could be fatally injured by the application of this device. Now, this is a launcher. It's very old, so some of our Vietnam era viewers might recognize it. Military nomenclature is an M203 launcher. So,
Is this the launchee?
yeah, this is an expended shell, expended cartridge, and what's good about these launchers are you can use a variety of projectiles in them. So we can launch chemical agents. We can launch impact projectiles, which is like a foam baton, or even a wooden dowel, that sort of thing. So I would be able to stand across the room at someone that might be armed with a crowbar, or a baseball bat, or a chair, and I don't want to get within a few feet of that person, because I could really get injured. So should I engage that person with a firearm? Maybe. If I'm alone, perhaps. If not, then it's incumbent on the officers to work together as a team, and someone should be ready for for lethal application. That way, everyone, at least all the officers and bystanders are safe. But that enables the officers to apply other less lethal means of force. So that's what this is. Now this is a single shot version. We have a multi-launcher. It's not on the table, and that would give the officer an ability to to more rapidly, more quickly use use those impact rounds or deliver chemical agents downrange.
I guess this is a baton.
Old-fashioned baton. This is a wooden straight stick. It's been part of police tools for many decades. And there are a variety of versions. Ones with side handles, some that collapse down, make it much more convenient and easy to carry. I wear a straight stick myself. This is not mine, but this is an impact weapon. Now, it falls under less lethal category, but as an impact weapon, you can cause fatal injuries, by applying this type of weapon, or even one of the launchers as well. So
We see on the television of many things, where an officer is just wham, 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 wham.
Yeah.
How many hits do you do before you stop?
that's a fair question, and the response is it depends. I'm not a particularly large officer. I do what I can to maintain my skills and fitness level, but if I'm dealing with someone that's larger or stronger, oftentimes younger.
Why? Because everyone's younger than you?
Almost, yeah. That's funny, Jane. I'll get you back. So those are real life factors that you take into account. Maybe there's more than one person I'm dealing with, and I'm by myself. So you can see when you start thinking about all these additional factors that come into play. Maybe one application of a baton works because I managed to cause a fracture and that person's not able to stand.
Do you, just like the number of bullets that are counted if they're expended at a scene, do you count the number of swings with contact?
Yes, absolutely. And and that's another thing that I think the public often is critical of. Is one or two or six strikes with an impact weapon necessary? Is it appropriate? And again, that snippet of someone's cell phone video really doesn't capture the totality of circumstances. So there's always a possibility for any of these tools to be used improperly or outside of policy. So I'll be the first to admit that, and that's the reason why we count every round. That's the reason why we count every strike. That's the reason why Taser has the ability to record all the information that it does, because at the end of the day, we will be held accountable for how we dealt with an incident where we're applying force against someone.
Now, this is unusual. In particular, this here is something, it just doesn't seem like it belongs on an item that the police department uses.
Right. I think there are a lot of people out there that will recognize this. It's essentially a paintball gun. This manufacturer is Pepperball, and the design and theory behind it is paintball, basically. So for those viewers out there who are familiar with paintball, this is called a hopper. It's just a container that you put projectiles in, and this device can actually fire off a variety of different types of projectiles. So I would open the hopper, but what we have is loaded with right now. You can kind of hear it, right? They're like round balls that are encased in kind of a really lightweight plasticky material. So this has the ability under compressed air to send projectiles downrange at about 350 feet per second. And the balls that are in here now are actually filled with a powdery form of CS gas. It's a chemical agent, like tear gas. But we can also put different types of rounds in here. So for training and practice, we can use inert rounds that are just basically filled with talcum powder, or rounds that are filled with water. So for training and practice, that's what we would use. But it also comes in a variety of hard plastic rounds. Those are glass breaking rounds. So we could actually use glass breaking rounds, like on a car or even a window in a structure, break the glass, and then use the pepper balls or CS gas, once the window is out of the way, and insert chemical agents to gain compliance or get someone to surrender.
Is it a single ball shot?
Yes. There are several in this hopper, probably can hold maybe 100 or so, and they're about that size of a large marble. So if you're familiar with paper ball or pepper ball, or paintball, I should say, paintball, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's exactly the same size as a paintball, and in fact, we do have marking rounds that are filled with paint.
Well, it looks like there's some talcum powder here too.
I hope that's talcum powder. Otherwise, I'll start crying here if I touch my face. So, like the marking rounds, say we're at an event where there are agitators, and the police are holding a skirmish line, or a demonstration, something like that, where there's an individual who's inciting civil unrest. We would be able to use a marking round and actually splatter that person with paint, and that will identify him as to all the other officers there that's an individual that needs to be taken into custody, once he violated some laws. And if we remove that one individual, that one agitator or inciter, the rest of the people there who are there to protest or whatever their purpose is can do so in a legal, in a legal fashion. So,
if you're not going to hit somebody with a marking round, would you normally shoot this at someone, like the pepper ball, or do you shoot into an area type of thing?
Yeah, well, the usefulness, effectiveness of this particular weapon in terms of delivering chemical agents is very local. So if I was going to inundate an individual with chemical agent, I might hit them in the chest. If I'm dealing with a crowd, I might skip it at their feet. So other than that, it might be good for filling the interior of a vehicle, that sort of thing. So to put chemical agents inside of a house or a larger building, this would not be the tool to use for that.
There are not very many agencies in Orange County or in other places that are willing to open the door to their department and to their operations and have a show like this. And I've done this for a long time, and it's unique, and it's absolutely a benefit to the community that you know that the police department is working with you, not against you. If you have any questions about today's show, you can call the Buena Park Police Department at 562-3901. With Sergeant Chris Nunez, I'm Jane Cameron. Thanks for watching.